Greetings. The face behind the ink. So, I figure while I'm working on one video, I might as well just follow it up with another one. Time is precious. Best not waste it. So anyway, Gorechain Chapter 1, Part 3. Edward stared at the fingers, coiled up like a dead spider. The rest of the hand was stiff as a board, rigor having set in almost the instant the arm was cut off. Some length up the bicep, above the elbow, was evidence of an eagle tattoo, faded and incomplete, as if the image had been scrawled over the flesh with a ballpoint pen. There was a tan line from where a wristwatch had been. The wound surrounding the removal was jagged, the flesh pulverized, the muscle shredded. The doomed man struggled, fighting back until his last breath. Was he the same guy from a few days ago? Yeah. Sad place to end up. Edward looked closer at the failed tattoo, pressing his thumb into the flesh. Just unluckier than others. Edward took the second arm out of the satchel and laid it on the counter. As with the first arm, it grew condensation from having been refrigerated. Sorry, I'm not laughing at this. It's just, so if you go through my older channels, like The Fortress and The Roadside, I think because I can write this stuff up, that's not the problem. The problem is I'm not that very good at reading it out loud because, I don't know, the connection between the brain and the eyes and the mouth, it's that. And then as I'm reading a sentence, the brain just clicks and I'm going to edit it as I'm reading it. So I'll record 45 minutes and get it pared down to like 10 minutes. So recording this, obviously I'll flub it quite a bit. And it just makes me kind of laugh. Anyway, as with the first arm, it grew condensation from having been Sorry. There was a paragraph, I think it was God, what was it? I think it was Blood and Briar chapter 8. It was just one paragraph. I think I reread it 15 times. And that's the other thing too with reading these out loud, is it if a paragraph is that hard to comprehend for my squirrel brain, perhaps it's that difficult in the comprehension part. Again, I'm not used to it. I'm used to reading. I'm just not used to reading it and processing it out loud. The reading out loud. I'm not used to vocalizing. I spend a lot of time living inside my brain, so talking out loud, it's kind of a challenge. So, but I might go back through the recordings and just record the outbursts. They're amusing. That's it. That reminds me of a thing. What was it? Winnebago Man. His outtakes. They're freaking hilarious. And that was just one. I was just when I was editing through the flubs and all that. That was just one of the things that just was just thinking about the Winnebago Man. Jim just going nuts over just, you just flub a line. So, anyway. As with the first arm, it grew condensation from having been refrigerated. The second arm was tanned and strong, covered in ink from the wrist to where the cut had been made just below the shoulder. The arm was cut with precision, the man dead prior to detachment. The first arm was to send a message. The second arm was to preserve a trophy, the blood carefully drained to give the arm a pale plastic appearance, in spite of the tan. Who was he? He was less lucky. Edward knew the tattoos covering the arm, some of his best work. Knowing the man the arm belonged to, there was some guilt for feeling sadness. The man was a killer and a beast. There was no reason to feel loss at his death. Paul Brewer was a generic thug, moving from city to city. Wherever his craft of violence was required, he was a phone call away. No one would guess. The blood on his hands, Paul a laid-back fellow, quick with wild stories about women and cars and thugs he knew from when he was first starting out. All of the names he dropped were dead or in prison. Some of the worst of all humanity, told in lurid stories made out as punchlines to some unspoken joke, in the manner of war stories. Edward was part of the family, so it wasn't as if the names were a mystery, or some secret that needed to be kept. The tattoos were trophies for everything Paul did, creating his own strange mythology to explain the stories the tattoos told. Let's see. The tattoos were trophies for everything Paul did, creating his own strange mythology to explain the stories that tattoos told. Okay, so it does make sense. He never mentioned this mythology to Edward, leaving the young man to just relate what the killer wanted in ink. The images were sprawling of debauchery and pain, blood and skulls. If the devil had to rebuild hell, Paul Brewer's tattoos were perfect for a blueprint. Edward laid Paul's arm out on the glass counter. The last time Edward saw Killer Paul, he said he wanted a skull shaped. Let's see. Okay, yes. Paul laid arms. Whoops, flubbed that one. Edward laid Paul's arm out on the glass counter. The last time Edward saw Killer Paul, he said he wanted a skull-shaped sailing ship on his lower back. Through the week Paul was in town, the two discussed the design, going through sketches and drawings. Regardless of the death toll Paul left in his wake, Edward grew enthusiastic over the project, sensing some return to the source of his artistic inspiration as he collected old sketchbooks and drawings from years back. Sorry, Ed. Gotta go to Tulsa. Boss sent me to collect on a debt. Might be back next Tuesday? You're getting there, with a ship. Maybe I'll tell you what it all is supposed to mean when I get back. Indicated by the arms in the gym bag, the debt Paul Brewer was out to collect was the one he owed himself. Edward pulled a cheap digital camera from under the counter. This would be the last time he would have a chance to see that swirling malaise of skulls intertwined with the wings of a raven. It was his favorite, of all the ink he did for Paul. Kid, when I'm done, I'll make sure you get this back. Paul tapped his finger over the raven's head, as if Paul Brewer had any control over what happened to himself. Kid, when I'm done, I'll make sure you get this back. It was always something weird for Edward to have heard the man say. When you get this back? Get back what? The drawing? The ink? Kid, when I'm done, I'll make sure you get this back. Was the arm sitting on his counter that return? Obviously not. If the big thug with the gym bag came in and demanded that the trophies be... When the big thug with the gym bag came strolling in, demanding that the trophies be preserved. The Raven had been expensive ink, superior to much of what Edward produced these days. Back then, he could still be inspired and ambitious, able to treat the skin as a canvas and not just a day job. It was a job that kept the sharp teeth of debt off his back. He owed everything to the family. If he planned an escape, the family would know it before he did. The dreariness of the day job was evident in the cartoonish images of wizards, buxom nymphs, and fairies covering the wall above the counter, and pirated images of cartoon characters mixed with roses, hearts, thorns, and coils of barbed wire, hung over the two waiting chairs and filling portfolios stacked on shelves. One of the men just outside the door knocked on the glass, a cigarette clamped between his lips, shaking his head. Edward put the camera away and stared at the arm, waiting for inspiration to return. Paul's voice echoed through his mind. Here he is, my favorite artist, my own personal Da Vinci. In the end, Paul's death was for the best. So that's a short video, but that's the other thing too, is I'm going to keep these short. Thank you for watching. Have a good night.